Oh, we are here. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Melanated Stamps. I have my good friend, and at the end of this conversation, you're going to love her just as much as me. And so she is here to share her expertise and about her experience being Black in Denver and all the things. So, welcome. Can you introduce yourself to all the people?
Of course. Hi, Jenaya. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's really an honor. I appreciate it so much. I'm Brittany Rose Green. I am a marriage and family therapist, but now a relationship coach and healer. And yeah, that's a little snippet about what I do and who I am. I'm a human being. I'm a human being who hails from Denver, but I now live in Rhode Island, which is also, really lovely and amazing as well. So. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we both became friends in Denver. We crossed paths and journeyed together for a couple, 3 years or something like that. Yes. So how did you get to Denver? Like, what was your connection there?
Yeah. So actually, my mother was born in Denver. Well, she wasn't technically born there, but that's where she grew up. And when all throughout my childhood, it's actually quite funny. So all throughout, talk about this is actually perfect for this conversation. So all throughout my childhood, every year, every summer and winter, I would always go up to Colorado, to Denver, to visit my mom's parents and all my cousins and everything like that. In fact, there were times where they would just leave me for a few months throughout the summer, and I would just stay with my grandmother and hang out with my cousins. It was amazing. I loved it as a child. But what's so freaking funny about this story is that it wasn't until I was probably in my late teens that I realized that white people lived in Denver. I thought Denver was just black. In fact, not that just white people lived there, that they were completely cut, like it was white, and there was just a small minority of black people. But what the
Really?
reason being, I know, so insane. The reason is because of the segregation there, right? So Denver is
Mm-hmm.
very like, densely populated with certain socioeconomic and demographic groups in certain parts of the town and parts of the city. And because I was hanging out with my black grandparents and my cousins and stuff, I thought only black people lived in Denver until I realized that that was completely false. So talk about my mind being blown when I actually lived there as like an adult, and like we were, we when we were journeying together, things were just very eye opening for me there at that time. It's kind of crazy. I know.
Wow. So when did
I
you
know.
realize Denver was not what you thought it was? Like, did you have a moment and you're like, oh, this is consistently what I'm noticing now? Like, what was that transition like for you, and how did you feel about it?
Yeah. So that transition happened when I actually lived there. So um, before we met, my parents moved to Denver when I was like 19. I think I was a sophomore in college. And I was living out in St. Louis, and St. Louis is very segregated, but it's also populated with a lot of different types of people. And it's open kind of segregation there. Like
Mm.
versus when I moved back to Denver and I realized that the demographic was not what I perceived it was when I was a kid, and that it was like it was a lot of microaggressions in Denver,
Mm.
right? So this like undercurrent of racism that wasn't really talked about, right? Because Denver seems to be this like very liberal kind of state or city, and in reality, it really never felt that way for me. And I was always I was a little shocked and confused that it was completely different from the Denver that I grew up with, versus the Denver that I was living in when I was 19 until about 22.
Mm.
So that was
Wow.
kind of, revealing.
Yes. What was your friend circle like in Denver when you were there?
So when I was, so I've lived in Denver like three different times in my life. So when I mean, I didn't live there, but like I've experienced different Denver wholly three different periods in my life. So when I was a kid, I had just my cousins. That was like my friend group. So we were all the same complexion and color and like whatever. And then when I was 19 and I lived there, I worked at Papado's Seafood Kitchen and I was friends with a bunch of servers. And, when you're serving at a restaurant, there is there's a lot of different ethnicities, but it was still very much heavily Caucasian, right? Heavily white. But I didn't really think about it much then. And truth be told, because I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I went to a private all-girls school, like I've always been around whiteness. I've always been around white people. So it didn't feel like my friend groups didn't feel that much different living in Denver than any other place that I lived in, even in St. Louis, because I went to a private Catholic college. I was a part of the BSA, the Black Student Alliance, and all that stuff, but I wasn't really as deeply connected to those people as I was my friends, which were predominantly white. Even though I always had like at least one or two, of my besties, my Black besties with me. So
yes, of course. Wow. So you came to Denver for your adult portion, and then you are now in Rhode Island. So how did you occupy your time when you were in Denver? Like, what types of things? You mentioned Papados, and I'm sure being a server, there was a lot of time. But did you do other things? Like, what was Denver like for you?
Yeah, so I feel like my most current experience of Denver is whenever you and I were living there, right? So when you and I were living there, I was a therapist out in the tech center on Greenwood Village area. So, during the weekdays, that was my time, right? I was spending a lot of my time working, case studies, clients, just trying to make sure that I was as knowledgeable as possible. And then on the weekends, I would just hang out with my girlfriends. We'd do brunches and lunches and dinners. And so probably a lot of the stuff that I would do was food related. But then you and I met at church. So church functions, limited church functions, because I really never felt like I fit in there either. And what else would I do to occupy my time? We would do like sports and stuff. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just lived in Denver and try to take advantage of the amenities that Colorado has, which is, it's beautiful there. So that was, one thing that was really great.
Yeah, I think my town over here is really big and it's not pristine. And so I miss like the smell of Denver being so clear and like the air. Oh my gosh. I think
Yeah.
that all the time. But it's the opposite of my life right now. Yeah, it's success. All right. So you are a therapist and you are a coach. Let's start with how you got into that journey and like what your expertise is. Yes.
So I think most therapists kind of fall into therapy the way that I did. Like you come from some level of dysfunction and you want to help people, and then people naturally come to you for advice. And then I thought I was going to be a physician. I was all geared up, ready to go to medical school, and my path completely changed. So then I ended up going out to LA for graduate school of psychology, clinical psychology in marriage and family therapy. And I lived in LA for about 3 years. And that was so much fun. And then I came back to Denver. And it was first moved back to Denver. I actually didn't, I wasn't a therapist. I actually decided to work for my dad as he works in assisted living facilities. So I was like his director of operations. And when I realized that working for your father is not the most healthy sometimes in relationships, not was for me. It was really difficult working for him. So then I decided, I was like, well, I should probably go use my degree now. So then I transitioned and I started working as a therapist out in the tech center. I also worked in Aurora. I worked at a substance abuse counseling center out in Aurora that was basically working directly with the criminal justice system, people with DUIs or DV or alcohol or addiction sort of stuff. And then I also started working for a private practice where I was a primary therapist there, and I started doing marriage and family therapy, couples work, working with sexual trauma, which was really difficult, and children. And so I have a lot of experience in a lot of different things when it comes to therapy, but something wasn't really sitting with me well. I just felt too limited. I felt too boxed in. And there's one thing that I hate, and I'll use that word intentionally. I hate being labeled. I hate being limited. I don't like being put in a box. I've been put in a box my whole life, being a biracial woman. People have always tried to tell me who I am and what I am and which box to check and which to not check. And I was just when it came to therapy, I had to check in with the government every 2 years. I was like, this is so stupid. I'm just trying to help people. So yeah, I was so over it. My personality was not built to be pigeonholed to one career, and a career that wasn't expansive enough for me to even cover the bills that I had going to graduate school. So that's when I was like, I have a lot of experience. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to transition and become a coach because it means that I can reach more people. I can actually work with people across the country and across the world if I choose. And that really excited me, and that lit me up. And that's how I transitioned to become a coach. And I specialize in relationships, because that's the predominant of my training. And I love working with women, especially women, and helping them empower themselves to find and help them find healthier love for themselves, and embracing their fullness, and embracing their entire being, and also helping them translate that into their relationships so that they feel worthy, they feel good, they feel deserving of the relationships that they actually desire versus the ones that they may have been settling for. So that is my passion. That is my purpose. I feel like my purpose on this earth is to translate pain and turn it into light and help people just shine as brightly as they possibly can and pass that along to others. And as a Black woman, it's really important for me to also do that for other Black women too, because we don't really talk about mental health or self-help or prioritizing yourself as a Black person, let alone definitely not a Black woman. I mean, I feel like the archetype of the Black woman is what's Mammy from Gone with the Wind, right? Hattie Mae. I feel like that is our archetype, right? People see us as this motherly figure, and we're here to be selfless. We're here to help everyone else but ourselves, help encourage everyone ourselves, take care of everyone else but ourselves. We're taking care of your babies, we're taking care of your sick husbands, we're taking care of your seniors. We're just the caretakers of the world. And I want to shift that paradigm, because it's not true. We deserve to put ourselves first. We deserve to be a priority, and we deserve not to be labeled or archetyped, So that was a long-winded answer. Hopefully that worked.
It. So much gold in one. Oh, it was so good. Absolutely. So, you mentioned the need for therapy. So, I'm in therapy, and my therapist is in the Lord's work this last couple of years. God bless her. And so, what do you tell people who were like me back in the day, who was giving the side eye to all y'all therapists, and you're like, I don't need this. I'll just fine all by myself. So, because I know that everyone needs a therapist, but I want you as a therapist to tell everybody that they need one. So what are
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. So what I would say, that's such a loaded question, mainly because therapy only works for the willing. Therapy only is good. Coaching is only good for people who are ready to do that work, because it is so It is so difficult making the transition from putting everybody else first to finally seeing yourself.
Mm.
Because a lot of times putting other people first in order to dim who we are, to not deal with what we went through, to not deal with the trauma, to not acknowledge that we have pain that we've been holding on to for our entire being. And so when you finally start that healing journey, it is this big transition, right? So you're going from holding all the cards to finally giving the cards to someone else, and you're like, please help me sort through them, even though I've been sorting through them for everybody else this whole time. Now I'm giving them to you to help me sort through them, and that can feel really unsafe. That can feel really dangerous. And if we think about generations of trauma, like especially as Black women, and I keep talking about Black women because I don't understand like fully the experience of a Black man. I just have my own framework, right? But as a Black woman, and the mama archetype, and all the generations of our mothers and our grandmothers, of all of the pain and everything that they had to experience growing up as a Black woman in America, I mean, there's no wonder why it feels so unsafe allowing someone else into your space, allowing someone else into your mind and into your heart, into your world. Like it almost feels as though, because the only part of you that you're trying to protect your identity as much as you can, because everyone else is telling you who you are, what you're supposed to be for them. And so to add somebody else into the mix, with the hopes that they're actually going to see you for you versus tell you who you're supposed to be for them, is really scary. And I would say that's the hard part, to make that jump. And I don't know if that was something that you also experienced before you made the transition to finally being like, okay, therapy maybe isn't that bad, I should give it a go. Like, what I'm curious about for you, like what made you finally decide that, like, okay, therapists aren't shitheads. let me
Yeah, like at the beginning of my journey, like in life, like I always thought that therapists were for crazy people. And I was like, well, I'm not crazy. I'm actually like really, really, really smart and I have everything together. But then once I was done with Dr. Land, I had like shoved everything under the carpet. I was like, I can't think about this right now because I have to finish my dissertation. And then as soon as I graduated, I was like, oh, my life's a shit show. Oh no. And it took probably about 5 years from that point until I sat in front of my therapist the first time. But also, I was in a Bible study group and at a church that was very pro therapy. And so, like, everybody was in therapy and they were always talking about it, and it seemed very normal. They were like, yeah, I went to therapy. And I was like, but you're not crazy. Like, I don't know. And then I had to go through the process of like, I can't afford it. And at the time, I was struggling with money, and I was like, I don't think I can afford this. But also, I need to not be in the place where I am right now. And I, being super smart, I had run out of all of the all of my own strategies, and I didn't know, and I was still in a mess, and I needed somebody to like walk me through this and like to make everything make sense. And so I walked in my therapist. So I Googled and did all the things. And of course, in Denver, since it's a very white town, and because of socioeconomics, there's a lot of therapy that happens in Denver. I went to two. I narrowed it down to two out of like 5,000. And one was black and one was white. And I was like, part of the reason I need therapy is because of white people. So like, I think I need to go and talk to the black one. And so I picked her, and I walked in the office and I was like, look, I'm on a plane to China in 36 hours. I have these four things I need help with. And she goes, all right, sounds like we have a lot to talk about. Yes. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And then, but through the process, and also through like the death of my brother and all the things and grieving and transitioning over here, I would not have made it in China if it wasn't for consistent therapy. Like, just it would have just been awful. And so yes, God bless all y'all, all of you guys. So
Yeah,
that's my journey. And
yeah. Thank you.
I tell all the people, yeah. You guys do amazing, amazing work. But also, as you said before, the very first thing you said is that you have to be ready to put in the work. Um, yes, and so you have to get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to do the work because it's hard. It's really hard. Mm-hmm.
Hard facing yourself. It's hard facing yourself, especially when you've done such a good job being an intellectual person, such
Yep.
a good job being like high functioning cognitively. And now you have to face your actual feelings and your emotions. Oh my gosh, it's such a different vibe. I mean, that's really what it is. It's just a different vibe. But I'm like, I think what's so cool is that first off, you were having this conversation, like you provided a platform for me to share about what it means to be like the work that I do, as well as like your experience, and we're normalizing it. Like I think it is starting to become more normal in the Black community to have therapists and outside people that we trust to help us see things a little bit more clearly. Like they have to be allies, like they have to be allies to our soul and allies to our journey and our experience. Because if you find a therapist, and not all therapists and not all coaches are one size fits all, sometimes you have to test them out. Like you got really lucky that you narrowed it down to 2 people and you happened to pick the right one. A lot of people have to go to therapists like off and on until they find somebody that really speaks to their journey. And also, like it's also important to know that it's not just like one therapist for the entirety of your life, right? It's therapy is built so that you don't need them anymore and that you move on to something else too when that time is ready. Sometimes it's after 2 weeks, sometimes it's after 10 years. It just depends on what your journey is. So normalizing therapy, normalizing coaching, normalizing like self priority is like so important to me, because coming from, I mean, I'm from Houston, Texas. Like, I lived in Denver. Like that's where my entire family still lives there. But I'm from Houston, Texas, and like neither my Houston family nor my Denver family, I don't think any of those people are in therapy. Like none of them. They all did. But it's so funny because even as a therapist myself, I had the same excuse as you did. I can't afford it. Like, I can fix this on my own. Like, all that stuff is so, it's a product of conditioning. It's also a product of self-doubt and fear, right? And we're afraid of what's going to come of us if we make ourselves a priority finally. And what actually happens is basically this phoenix rising. It's the birth of you. It's not going to diminish you in any capacity. It's going to help you rise. And gosh, man, like I just hope everybody does it. Everybody needs it,
Everybody. Yes, for sure. For sure. Can you speak more about, so we're past like okay, so I don't need a therapist. We passed that part. And now we're at, okay, I'm going to go Google this real quick. What are some questions that you need to ask yourself and or ask the therapist to make sure to try to get a better fit for what you're needing? Yeah.
Totally. So can I just say that I love social media for this very thing, right? I don't think that, so as a coach, the way that I show up, the way I promote myself is a lot more, what's the word? I'm more public than I would say a normal therapist. And that's just the product of what coaching is, because coaching isn't necessarily it's a different container. It's a different container. So let me just speak about the difference between coaching and therapy, and then I'll tell you like what are good. So a therapist is somebody you're going to want to go to for like the immediacy after some trauma, something that you've been maybe carrying for a long time. Like the therapy is to help you get stable, is to help you stabilize, to help you find normalcy again, to help you feel at least like grounded in your body and your being, so that you can continue to reach your goals, right? So therapy is more client led. It is led by the person who is seeking the therapy. The therapist is basically there as a mirror and as a reflective tool. And we give you like a few like tips and things that we've learned. Maybe we'll ask you the right questions in order to kind of help you along your journey. That's what a therapist is. A therapist does not give advice. A therapist does not tell you what to do. Like these things, even if you experience that in therapy, it's like the way that it's designed is not necessarily for that. So a coach, and when you would want to go into coaching is after you've had really good therapy and you feel grounded and embodied, and now you're just like, okay, how do I get to that next thing, right? So my therapist didn't tell me what to do next, but I see that this person over here has what I want, and she's saying that she can tell me how to get there based off of her experience and all the people that she's helped. I want that thing, so that's where I'm going. Like, and so then you would hire a coach who has the thing that you desire, has the thing that you're looking for in your life, has a similar lifestyle or at least a mindset that's similar to yours that can help you get from point A to point B. And it's way more coach led, right? So the coach is telling you, I've already beat this problem. I've already solved your problem. Let me show you how to solve it for yourself too. And so that's when you would identify finding a coach. So for therapists, if you're finding a therapist, Googling therapist, I would go to psychologytoday.com. You put in your city, you put in a topic that you're looking for. So my specialty out in Denver was narcissism, and I was also like the family therapist at my private practice. So anybody who needed a narcissism expert in Denver, Colorado, if they would type my name in, I'm not on Psychology Today anymore, but at the time they typed my name into Psychology Today, I would have popped up, right? So that's how you would like Google depression, anxiety, family issues, just be a specific. And then you want to, at that point, it's about connection. So most of the time, at least get a phone call in before you go see them. Most therapists either have like a free quick intake, or they have like maybe a cheaper intake or something. And then you would ask those questions. You would just show up and just feel out whether or not you felt safe, whether or not you felt connected to this person, whether or not you felt like this person could see you for who you were. So I would say in the initial phases, it's all about the feeling. Like, what do you feel when you're around this person? What do you feel in their presence? And questions to ask are like, how long you've been doing this? What kind of success have you had with clients with the same issues that I have? Can you take me through some of the ways that you help people? Those are like simple questions that you would ask a therapist to help you get from point A to point B. As a coach, though, like I said, coaches are a little bit more public. So for me, if you were looking for someone like me, you're like, oh, she talks about narcissism, she can help couples, she's all about women's empowerment and helping people like have healthier, better, long-lasting relationships. Okay, so like you're Googling that, or you're on Instagram looking at those hashtags. And then at that point, just watch my videos. I'm all over YouTube. I'm all over like Instagram. I have Facebook communities. Like that's how you would get to know whether or not I was a right coach for you, right? So you would most of my clients have been following me for years before they finally decide to work with me one-on-one. Some people hear me once and they're like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I need. That's what I want. But I would say, especially like, it's really hard to feel safe, and it's really hard to connect with somebody, especially virtually. I mean, we live in a COVID era. We live in COVID times. Like, we're not meeting people the way we used to. So we have to rely on these sorts of interactions. And that's like the way that you're going to probably find your best fit. Like, does this person have the lifestyle that I want? Does this person have the thing that I'm looking for? And what are they talking about? What are they doing? And that would be the best way, I would say, to find your coach, because coaches are a lot more public. I feel like there's one other thing I wanted to say, but that's all that I got for now, which was a lot.
So with your coaching practice right now, what are you doing with this? Because you talked about your therapy expertise, but the coaching I feel like is a little bit different, right? You have a niche.
Yeah. So as a coach, I deal pretty much with a lot of the same things I was dealing with before, but just not as heavily on the trauma side. I still work with people who've experienced trauma, but again, they're more stable and they are ready to face it a little bit more so that they can move through it and, how would I say it? Basically incorporate it into their story as the story part of their strength. versus just processing through the trauma. So I work with women, especially spiritual women, who are like struggling in relationships, whether it's relationships with their family, with their friends, with their parents, with their colleagues, and with romantic partners. And I help them find out what's going on in them that's been precipitating these relationship struggles. And we get to the bottom of it, and we excavate those false beliefs, and then we help replace them with new, more positive, healthy beliefs that help them find the relationships that they want, to help them find love. That's like the premise of everything that I do, is helping people find love and feel loved. I have a couple like different, so like right now, kind of like going back to how overwhelming it can feel to try to find a therapist, or should I try to find a coach who's a good fit. A colleague of mine and I created this space called the Collaborative Healing Spot, so that we could give people access to different types of healing journeys and different types of coaches and therapists that they could, either learn from on this platform, or actually could hire to work with them one-on-one. And, I felt like that was a great way to help people vet some of these, take the pressure off of trying to figure out what healing route to take, and what they maybe really need. Because a lot of times we don't even know what we really need until we start talking about it, until we start exposing ourselves to it. We think we need one thing. So maybe we're going to see somebody for depression, but in reality, it's not about depression. It's actually because you don't have the right nutrition, and you haven't been moving your body. And so it's actually that, like, your gut actually needs health and help, not that you're actually depressed. You just don't have, your gut's not in alignment. And so, providing those opportunities for people who may not have that same level of exposure, because I know a lot of really great people, but I wouldn't know any of the people that I knew if I wasn't in this world, right? Like, if I wasn't a part of this career, it would be really hard for me on the other side trying to figure out what I needed or who I needed, and who was going to me the most. So yeah, that's like a part of the thing that my coaching business is like kind of afforded, is like my personal coaching, and then this other space, which I love.
So let's talk about identity and such. And so you mentioned before we started recording that you identify as biracial, people of color, and Black. What are your thoughts about this? Because I think this is great.
Yeah. So I am biracial, and that in itself is like a long story, because my mother was adopted into a Black family, which is actually really interesting and complicated, and makes my family dynamics really colorful. But she is a white woman from England who was adopted into a Black family. So genetically, I am biracial. And growing up as a kid, in the early 90s, there was no box for me to check. I wasn't allowed to check both boxes. I had to identify as one, or, and that was it. So of course, people see me as Black, and so therefore I'm Black, right? And this kind of goes back to the initial part of the conversation, which was that I hate labels, right? Like, I hate being labeled. And it's because of this thing that happened to me as a kid, where everybody told me what I was and who I was. And not to mention, growing up in Houston, Texas, it is heavily populated with a lot of Creoles, right? So, or mulattoes, which we don't really use that term. Creoles, more PC term, I think. But like, so women that look even lighter than me, women that kind of look like my mother. And so people just assumed that my mother was Creole, and not that she came from a completely different continent. So there's just a lot of, again, these labels and things like that really frustrated me growing up. So it took a lot of work for me to get to the place where I felt confident and comfortable identifying myself personally as a biracial woman, because that's what I am, and owning my full ethnicity, and owning my full heritage and all that comes with that, right? And it's not even two races. I would say that it's multiple, right? So even the fact that it's just biracial is kind of limiting in itself, but at least it's more expansive than just being labeled as black or white or whatever. And then as a person of color, I mean, I think that it just covers all of us, you know, person
Yeah.
of color. But it's really funny because I don't think I've ever called anyone else a person of color. Like I feel like that's just something that's easier for whiteness to say, right? Like easier for white people to identify all of us, to lump us all into one big category, you know, because it's not just us. It's some Asian Americans, it's some Native Americans, it's South Americans, and like it's anybody who doesn't have white skin or hails from a European descent, which to me is a little ridiculous. Like I think we all have color.
Yeah.
All of us have some sort of melanin. No one's translucent or completely clear or white, and so like that's like a whole other thing. But yeah, so that's kind of my personal views on those terms. But I think person of color feels a lot better than being called a Negro or even African American. If I'm honest, to me, I'm like, I don't know. My lineage to Africa is so far back. Like,
Mm.
I would say that you are an African American, right? Your parents are from an African country that you can actually identify. My best friend in college, Ugo, her family is from Nigeria. Like
Yeah.
straight up from Nigeria. Her mom speaks Igbo. Like she is African American. Like so
Yeah.
for me to say African American felt wrong because I don't know any of my family that comes directly from that continent.
Yeah.
I have to go through my family lineage to even identify there. So, even that term kind of made me frustrated growing up, and even to this day. So I would say that I prefer person of color over African American for some strange reason. That's just my personal
Fair.
preference. So.
That's fair. Yeah. What was it like being biracial in Denver? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so, you know, it's fascinating because I don't know, it's so interesting thinking about that time. And even the stuff that I still go through, I guess, but um, I feel like being biracial in any state has afforded me more opportunity or not even more
Mm.
opportunity, or less hazing, less covert, overt racism. Um, However, there was not always, there were a lot of times where there was this, I could sense the underlying tone was that, well, even if she's light and even if she looks that way, she's still black, right? Like I could still feel that undercurrent. So it's like almost like I was caught between two worlds always, right? Like I was never white enough and I've never been black enough. I was also never really like welcomed by a lot of black people in many of the states that I lived in. I was never black, which had its own undertone of its own, right? So being biracial, I think, in Denver and really anywhere, kind of it has its limitations because nobody really wants us except for except for other biracial people. We understand how that feels to not feel like you are connected to either community, that you're disconnected from either community. And so, yeah, like I really didn't. I have a couple experiences, like where people called me the N-word, or like they would just blatantly just not serve me or not come like I mean it was just so bizarre. And it's like I'm a woman who's educated and like I have the same like affordability, like to live here, to be here or whatever. And so I don't understand why any part of the way that I look would have mattered in any of those situations, or why anybody would feel the need to call me out my name, right? Or call me out because of my skin color. but it still happens, right? And it still happened in the in the in the 200s or 200s, the 2000s,
Yeah.
you know, 2019. Like people think that racism is gone. It's like, no, it's not gone at all. Like it's just some places are very, very covert about the way that they handle their closet racism. Um, yeah, and what I really noticed is that my friends, my white friends, because they have a black friend, right? Even, you know, like because they have a black friend, they automatically assumed that they weren't racist, or that they didn't have sort of undertones. But I learned really quickly during everything that happened in 2020, during the protests and the riots, like who my real friends were, who actually really supported me in all of my ness, not just because I was their friend, but because I was black, right? Because I am black, because I am a woman of color, and them actually seeing me fully, not just how they wanted to see me, which was just another one of their white friends, you know, like that's how people, I think sometimes, especially when you're around a lot of whiteness, they just want to associate you with their whiteness versus seeing you for your beauty and your identity.
Yeah.
You know, so that was kind of my experience there. And, you know, with a lot of my white friends in Denver that I hang out around, like that's my community. They're my like best friends, but had to check them real quick during everything that was going on to remind them of my blackness, right? Which is frustrating in itself. Like I don't want people to label me anyway. I just want people to see me. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you feel this, you just want people to see you and in all of your uniqueness, not for your sameness. Like I
Right.
want to see Jenaya for her uniqueness, not for her sameness.
Yeah.
And that has been, I think, the struggle that I felt everywhere I've lived.
That is
Um, Racial, woman of color. Yeah.
yeah. Can you define whiteness? Because you said it a lot, and I also appreciate how you've separated whiteness from white people. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So whiteness is kind of it's that it's that to me it's that saying where like, oh gosh, hang on, I just had it. Where it's, oh, you know, like the people are like, well, I don't see color.
Mhm.
It's like that to me is whiteness. It's like, ugh, you have to like we all see color, like we all see all the things. Like not everybody looks like you, right? So to me, that's whiteness is having this it's this projection of the view of the world that they want to have on everything and everything.
Mm.
Um, and their experiences. They're like, well, because I do this, then this can't really be happening. That to me is whiteness. There's no ability or propensity to step into someone else's cultural shoes, step into someone else's socioeconomic shoes to see the world through their lens. To me, it's just like, well, I don't do this, so therefore I don't do this, so therefore it doesn't exist, or therefore like I'm not this, I'm not racist, I'm not X, Y, and Z, whatever. That to me is whiteness, which has nothing to do with white people, right? Like I mean, not completely, right? Like it's not about the person, it's about their. I would say whiteness is a again like an identity. It's a characteristic,
Mm.
personality.
Yeah, for sure. Um, oh, that's so good. Um, so when you were in Denver, did you how did it feel when you found another biracial person? Did it feel like what you would imagine, like, I'm not biracial, so when I see a black person, I get very excited. But does it feel the same for you as a biracial person when you see a biracial person in Denver?
It's kind of funny that you say that. I don't know too many biracial people, actually. So I do, but God rest his soul. Like he passed away, like 5, 7 years ago now. But he, oh gosh, he was like every time I saw him, he just like it lit me up, right? Like totally lit me up. I was like, oh my gosh, like ah. we're the same, you know, like, so I totally feel you. I would say that I really get lit up whenever I see little biracial babies. So I'm like, yay, more of them are being made. Like, I'm just like, life is changing. Like, you know,
Yes.
and I did see a Denver. There was a lot of interracial couples, which, you know, lit me up like completely. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, more people like me. Like, that's awesome. They're coming on the scene. Like, people aren't having these hiccups anymore. And, you know, I am in an interracial marriage as well. And, you know, like when I see people that look like Eric and I, it makes me really excited. You know, I
Yes.
can't help it. Like, yay, there are
That is
more of us, you know?
great.
Um, and that's not, you know, because like I think Black love is beautiful. I think Asian love is beautiful. I think love is beautiful, period. Like it, to me, it doesn't matter who you're with. So like to see that people are starting not to care as much about that, you know, I think people still care, but not as strongly as they did, back, maybe
Mm,
even back 10 years ago, right? It
yeah.
hasn't even been that long, 10 years ago. Feels really good because to me it feels like some level of progress. So yeah,
For
I
sure.
light up whenever I see little mulatto babies.
Yeah, exactly. So, interracial marriage, what are your thoughts? Like, how is this going for you right now in 2020? Like,
We've had to have a lot of really hard conversations. We really have, because I think, and I don't know if this has happened to you, I feel like the cool thing about you, Jenaya, is that you are so vocal about your experience. You share. This has been a part of your healing journey. It's been a part of your journey as a woman and empowering other people to see the lens more clearly. Like, I feel like this is your purpose, right? To share these stories. Um, versus me, my purpose is a little different. My purpose is about talking about like removing the veil from like love, and like what relationships look like. So I don't talk about my blackness, or my black experience or my black ass that really like that much, like in comparison to, well, until, I wouldn't even say until, but like I really didn't feel like I had a space or a platform to share my stories in a safe way until everything kind of came out, where people were actually like looking at it and talking about it, and it was everywhere. And it's like at that point I couldn't not say something. Like I had to say something and explain that, like, just because you know me and you think you know me, you don't know everything that I keep hidden. You don't know everything that I've actually been through. You don't know how people have called me the N-word, and people have called me like out my name, and who have like completely just blatantly dismissed me and ignored me and pretended like I didn't exist. Like, you don't know any of that stuff, but I'm going to tell you now, because now it's safe for me to, because everyone's talking about it. And it's very similar to trauma. You know, when you go through a very traumatic experience, you don't believe anybody will care. You don't believe anybody will hear you. Maybe you try to share it, but those people who don't have the space to receive your trauma will dismiss you. They'll make you feel like what you experienced wasn't even that bad. They'll minimize you and all of these things. And that is what I experienced as a Black woman in this country, as a biracial woman in this country, like, you know, as a person of color in this country. Like, I seriously felt all of those same feelings of not feeling safe to share my personal experience and my journey. And so with my husband, these conversations had to come out, and he had no idea. He was actually there for a lot of some of the experiences that we went through, like where, gosh, it was so frustrating. Like, this happened even like last year before all this stuff came about. But people would constantly, I have a ring on my finger, we're holding hands. People would constantly ask, so are you guys like together or separate, like for checks and stuff? And I'm like, are
mm,
you serious? I'm sitting, we're holding hands, like I'm wearing a ring. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're gonna
mm,
ask us if we're or separate? Or they would put the bill in front of me instead of in front of him for whatever odd reason, which I thought was very fascinating. And I was
wow.
like, that, yeah, it was so bizarre. Like, and I don't know if these were subconscious conditionings that they didn't even know that they were doing, right? Because sometimes we just subconsciously play out some of our racial experiences, or we play out our biases.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious. I had no idea, but like that shit would happen all the time. People would. I remember we were at this, what was it called? Uh, was it Central Market in Denver?
Denver
Remember
Central.
that place?
Yes, I love that
Yeah,
place. Mhm.
I love that place too. But Eric and I went there together, like right before, I think it was probably like a few months before we were actually moving. And we were standing at the counter, and I kid you not, we waited there for 15, 20 minutes. They looked at us and they like did not come to serve us. They served the couple that came up right next to us. We had nothing in front of us, no menus, no drinks, no waters, like nothing to indicate that we had been ready or served. We were just standing there like trying to get their attention. And they completely just did not serve us and went to the couple right next to us that showed up maybe 10 minutes after we had gotten there.
Wow.
Sitting there, and I was like, are you kidding? Like, what is going on? Like this is so weird. And to me, it felt like whoever was working behind the bar, I wouldn't say that that's all of Central Market, right? Like, I don't believe that the entire staff is like that. But whoever's working that day, like, I felt targeted in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, targeted. Eric doesn't understand, what it's like to drive a car in America and hear lights behind you. And like immediately, like I freeze and I get nervous. And I know that I'm a woman, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. And we're seeing that all over the news. We're seeing all over the news that it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what kind of skin you're in. It doesn't matter if you're woman or male. Like if you have blackness, if you are black, if you are some sort of person of color, you are targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so difficult for me to have that conversation with my husband because he just didn't get it. He had no clue. And at first, he got defensive like most white people can get. He was like, well, I'm not like that. And I was like, I'm not saying that you are, but I need you to just hear my experience and hear why I have fear and validate that my fear is valid, considering everything that you're seeing. And I need you to just honor that this is my truth. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to try to dismiss it or defend your honor because I'm sharing my truth. I'm just trying to share my truth with you. Like, it has nothing to do with you. Just validate that what I'm saying is true for me.
Yep.
And those conversations had to be had with all of my white friends, my husband, like white peers and colleagues. I mean, like, it was a lot. It was a lot, you
How
know?
did you, during this time of you explaining and re-explaining, how did you take care of your heart and your energy and your own mental health as you're having these conversations over and over and over again?
Yeah. Well, so that's so perfect because at some point, I think I gave myself permission not to have to talk about it. So some of my friends were upset because I kind of just like ghosted a little bit. I was just like, I just needed to go internal because I didn't feel like I needed to be the one to try to convince people anymore, to convince people that my experience was real. And so I just kind of like recluded in. And then at the time, I also had a coach, and she was her family hails from Vietnam. So she's also a woman of color, and she has similar experiences, not the same, but similar experiences living in America. And so having her there, having her see me, having her hold space for me, having her acknowledge her mutual experiences and my own experiences was so helpful. Like she just saw me. So having that space, like hiring my own coach and having my own coaching experience, my own therapy and stuff like that got me through that time too, right? Like that was super important.
Mm,
So I mean, I think a lot of this is just about giving ourselves permission to not have to be the one to explain this to every single person. And if you feel called or led to do that, then that is your call, that's your role.
mhm.
But I didn't feel call. It was just draining me. You know what I mean?
It is very draining. I had the same sort of experience. It like I'm very vocal in a lot of things, but I also had to create boundaries because people would be in my inbox with capital letters and calling me all the things, and I was like, that's not what we're doing. But I was not clear with, especially on like my Facebook page, my personal one. What you're not about to do is get on my page and act raggedy and be racist. And
Right.
all, like if you have a legitimate question, my personal boundary is like if you have a legitimate question, you need to show evidence that you have tried on your own to find the answer first. Like, I'm not going to be Black 101 for white people in the year of our Lord 2021. There are books you can go
Yeah.
Google. Google's wonderful. So go Google it. And then you can
Yeah.
say, hey, Jenaya, I was reading a book and it said this. Can you clarify based on your personal experience? Absolutely. Sure would. But I'm not going to be your first point of reference and point of contact. We're not doing that anymore. So boundaries with these conversations is hard, but so necessary. Oh, that was so good. Okay. Um, do you have a message for white people, black people, and biracial people? What would you like to say to these groups individually?
Individually? Oh gosh, okay. Uh, well, so for the white people, I would say be curious, do your research. There are a lot of, I was trying to find, there's this one girl that I follow on Instagram and I forget her name. I was just trying to look her up. But she is all about dismantling systematic racism and and I think like that's a great place to start, is to understand that there is a deeper racism going on here that is beyond just even like color differences or like, you know, microaggressions or aggressive acts towards Black people on the surface. We're talking about deep systemic racism that is like funneling Black people and white people to different schools, that is giving people different opportunities. Like that stuff is super important to research and understand and know about, which, you know, is hard to face. And I would say for white people, like it's going to be challenging trying to receive something that feels counterintuitive to your beliefs, which is honor the people who are sharing them with you. Know that like if there are a lot of us talking about it, then it's probably real. It's not fake. If the entire population of people are saying that this exists, it probably exists. So just like, you know, honor our truth and be curious and be open to receiving something that's different than your perspective. To Black people and people of color and biracial people, because I put us all in the same, you know, we have different layers of the experiences that we go through. But at the end of the day, we're people of color and we have been, you know, discriminated against and profiled and all of these things in this country and in other countries too, right? It's not just in America. Like we're talking about
Everywhere.
the patriarchy at large. We're talking about the world.
Everywhere.
So, right, I would just say that for you, hold your boundaries. You don't have to play into anyone's archetype anymore. You don't have to be the Black friend if you don't want to be. You don't have to explain your Blackness to other people unless you want to. Like, I think it's just really important for us to find our communities where we can talk about these things so that we're not holding them in our bodies all the time for like, you know, because it makes us sick. You know, I really do believe that the reason why a lot of our Black bodies and getting, you know, diabetes and heart disease and sickle cell and like all these things is because of the trauma that we're holding on into our system. So just finding a safe place where you can have community and share and share your voice and share your experience and be acknowledged, I think is super important and impactful. And of course, get a coach or get a therapist or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Your favorite place in Denver that you think everybody needs to go?
Oh gosh.
If you have to.
Okay. So my first favorite place to go, because it is everything that I feel like Denver, like Colorado, like if you're living in Denver and you don't want to get to the mountains, right? Like Denver, Washington Park, I think is where everybody needs to go. In the summertime, it is incredible. There are volleyball nets everywhere. Everybody's picnicking outside. They're laying out. I mean, it's just so much fun. And it's that crisp, clean, beautiful Denver air that we love, right? And then another place, where else do I think you need to go? This place is so silly, but I love it. The Irish Rover. And I know we're talking about Blackness and Black people, but this place is so much fun. And they play 90s hip hop. And yes, they're going to be dancing with a bunch of white kids, but that's fine. They play 90s hip hop and they just like, and you just get down and it's just so much fun. And it's all women and men our age, right? So it's not the younger community, which I found to be really difficult in Denver. There was like either there's places for like the older community, like 50s and up, or there's places for like younger kids that are like in their college years, like 20s, but there was rarely any spaces for like the 30-year-olds, right? So the Irish Rover is a great place for like the 30-year-olds if you want to get down. I loved it. I know. I can't help it, guys. It was
I love it. Okay, I just have a couple more questions. So imagine that there's someone that's listening to this and they are just like living their regular life and they're not doing anything spectacular. They're just making it. But they have like they're like, I want to do and be better. What advice do you give them? You're like, to go from regular to we doing something cool now with your life.
okay. So I'd assume that if you're just like barely making it, that you're probably just surviving, right? So my advice to you is to figure out what's going to take you from just surviving to actually taking that first step. So once you feel stable enough where you feel you have a little bit more clarity, then like what's one thing that you could do that would be just for you, like not for anybody else, that's just for your own benefit, that makes you feel good and makes you brings you joy. So that could be something as little as like maybe journaling, right? Maybe when you journal, it makes you feel good and just lights you up. That's going to give you a lot of clarity. It'll also help you focus on like what your goals are. Like, after you're journaling enough, you'll start to see patterns of like what you actually want in life. I would also say like taking care of your body, right? Like, so if the one thing that you can do right now is just like going for walks or start getting a gym membership, working out or whatever that is, like choosing different foods, that's what could help you completely start to shift your mindset from going to barely making it, just kind of surviving regular basic life, to upgrading it just a little bit. And what you'll find is that if you just do one thing that's prioritizing you as a whole being, it will become a snowball effect. You'll start to gain momentum and you'll start to see things that you actually want to incorporate into your life, further down the line. And then, and that's maybe where you come find me and I can help you.
Absolutely. A book that people need to read.
Okay. I was preparing because I really didn't have an idea at first, but then I was like, oh, wait, hang on. So it's called Humankind, and it's by Ashley Island. And she is a girl that I went to middle school and high school with back in Houston, Texas. And she's a pastor now in Michigan in a huge church out there. And this book is incredible because it's basically talking about everything that we need, right? Which is this idea is if we just identified ourselves as being human and we were kind to one another, how would that translate or just transform the world at large? And so this book is available on Amazon. It's amazing. And she tells personal stories. It's a Black author. She tells personal stories about her Blackness in Houston, Texas. It's kind of funny. I'm a part of a couple of them, which she didn't tell me until I read it. And I was like, oh, there I am. Okay.
I love it.
It's kind of funny to find, I was like, oh, Brittany, that's my name. That's me. But that's not why I'm plugging it. It's because this book is really, I think it's perfect for what's going on now and to give you a little taste of what it feels like to be in Black shoes. Because her melanin is beautiful. She has this beautiful, dark, just the most smooth, beautiful, dark, creamy skin. And it's just gorgeous, like no blemishes, like nothing. And her experience growing up with that skin in Houston and how difficult it was for her, is a part of this book. And so, Humankind, that's the one.
Absolutely. Last question, and then we're done. Is how can people support you, find you, hire you, follow you, all the things.
All the things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Instagram is the best jumping place for me. And like I said, it's a great way for you to get to know who I am, understand like how I help people and like what my vibe is all about. And that's just Brittany Rose Green. That's my Instagram handle. And then if you want to check out my website, it's brittanyrosegreen.com. Super simple. And then if you want to take your journey like a step further, like you're not ready to choose me or hire a coach or a therapist, but you want to know more about what that looks like and what that journey would look like, the Collaborative Healing Spot. It is a membership community on Facebook. It's only $19 a month, and you have access to a ton of resources, from health and wellness, stress management, relationship, parenting. I mean, the gamut is so long. We had an acupuncturist on last week. We talk about a lot of different things. So that's a great place for you to get your toes wet, to start to see if this is something that you want or journey that you think is you're ready for. And you can be as active or as inactive as you want to be. You can just show up and be in the space and be a part of our energy, which is kind of healing in itself. So yeah, that's kind of like what I'm all about. And those are some of the communities that I have.
Yay, excellent. Uh, So much joy, so much joy. We are done for today. Thank you so much for joining Melanated Stamps and sharing your expertise and your love, and the energy has been fantastic. So go find her.
Yep.
And I will also, on the episode and the show notes, like I'll put all of your things so that it'll just be like an easy click for folks. Yes. All right, friend. Yay.
Awesome. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Just
Thank you.
yes. Welcome. I'm going to stop the recording just a minute.